Hey everyone, this is Cary here with the RUDIS podcast away with my partner here, Matt Dernlan. And Matt, how you been? It's been a few weeks since we actually did a shoot.
It has, man. I think people have been chomping at the bit. We've been getting a bunch of emails in our inbox like, when's the new book coming out? What one are you going to do? So I think it's fun to finally jump back into this. And, I'm sure you got a lot of busy things going on. School just started for you guys. What is it? Second week back for you guys at this point?
Third. Yeah, Third. We started our second full week, but the guys, the first week we started on Wednesday, and so they're into their third week, and freshmen are getting adjusted and getting on the schedule, and upperclassmen, they just rolled into it. They were going to class and in the room working out and doing everything they need to do. So it's been good, but it's a little tough to find the right book for what we do. We're trying to find some books that are interesting and not dry and things that we feel like could be helpful. So sometimes we get a book and then we toss it aside and say, nah, that's not that one for us. But I like this one we're reading right now. By what was the author's name again, Matt?
We were actually doing the book "Leaders Eat Last" by Simon Sinek. Nice. This is actually a follow up to his first book, which was. What was it called? It was about the why. Yeah,
about the why. And I told you I was actually I've been messing around with some of Jocko's books, and actually the first book I grabbed was a little bit about a lot of it was about why you do things, goal setting and all the things you need to do to get yourself moving in the right direction. But if we want to jump into it, man, the first chapter this is. The book "Leaders Eat Last" and is the title, and the author starts out and he's talking about the Marine Corps, and I didn't know this. It makes a lot of sense. The military is always going to put out great leaders. They need to for the situations that they do, and he talks about in the Marine Corps when they are in that the junior privates or enlisted men, they will all eat first, and then the officers will eat last, and which is the way it should be. Men respond to leadership and not somebody that's just, in the sport of wrestling, we say body language and everything else. The leader's always got to be confident. He's got to always be in control. He can't be looking thirsty all the time or hungry all the time. And you start to build that relationship. And I think anybody that's under you, starts to have respect for. I know I would, you know what I mean? In fact, I've been in situations, and you probably have too, where in our not just in wrestling, but most of our lives involve wrestling, that I've been in situations where coaches, you could tell they were selfish and maybe hadn't got past that competitive edge of them, and didn't put the welfare of their athletes first. And I think anybody who's listening, as any coach knows that in the end, it's what we're always talking about. When an athlete really trusts you, then you're going to see response, and then he's going to be more likely to follow direction and more coachable, and you got to have that relationship there, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes that I took away, and it was it was part of the introduction of the book, and it was a quote by John Quincy Adams, and he said, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, do more, to become more, you're a leader." And those are easy words to say, but how do you actually get to the point where you can inspire people to dream, to believe more? And I think to do that, for people to be inspired, first, they need to know, if you're going to ask them to run through a wall for you, they better know that you're going to run through a wall for them. And I think that's, this simple principle of just how the Marines eat. And it's like, no, our troops go first. It's not about the leader. The true leader is always going to be looking out for the best interest of their team, the best interest of their troops. And so, every part of your action has got to start with that thought process in mind. Like, it's about the team. It's not about me, that's a difficult thing, because we all have egos. We all have pride. But we also, the first, and the biggest thing is making sure our troops, our teams, our business, everybody's feeling taken care of, everybody's feeling valued. And I think that's the biggest point of this book, is like, it's not about it's really about making the distinction. I think they outlined this in the introduction of the book as well, is really, I think in a lot of jobs these days, it's about management as opposed to leadership. And the thing that Simon Sinek is trying to address is like, that's a backward concept. If you're going to really have an organization that thrives and flourishes, you've got to have great leaders. You can't have great managers, because great managers, they're managing numbers, they're managing outcomes, they're managing performance, right? They're not really designed or directed to grow or lead people. And what Sinek was saying in this book is that's completely opposite about how truly great companies or teams actually operate and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you're as a leader, you're always trying to build up that management and teach them. So one day when they fall into that role, you know, they know the responsibility and how you want people to grow, you know, right? You want you want to build them up under you. I mean, nobody ever has enjoyed being around the negative coach. And when I say negative coach, like a lot of people say old school. I'm a fan of old school coaching in the right manner, you know, the positive way, not the old school where, you know, I'm going to make you run 50,000 sprints just to make you suffer. You know, the ones who built you up but were hard on you, and when you needed a kick, you got a kick, and when you needed picked up, they picked you up. And you know, that's where he hits in here, and that's always the job of the leader. And like I think now in my position, what I'm always trying to do is, I guess you can call them the managers, my upperclassmen on the team. You know, we try to give those guys leadership roles. And I don't want to put all the responsibility on them, because they're you know, we're such an individual sport as well. But they would kind of be the managers in that position. And as a staff, we lean on those guys to know what's going on socially on the team, what's going on, you know, when we're not in the practice room as a group, you know, who's doing extra, who's not doing extra. You know, I would call those guys the managers. And your hope is someday those guys, you know, go off and have great jobs, and now they know how to lead, and they learn from us, or, you know, they get into coaching and lead their own team and pick it up and build it up. Did you like the part about the guy when he talks about the guy flying the Warthog, the plane that goes low? They call it the tank killer.
Yeah, Johnny Bravo.
I really enjoyed,
right?
Yeah, Johnny Bravo. In that section of the book, where, you know, just quickly, if you're listening along, you know, basically they were over there in Afghanistan when we first went in, and he had to fly cover, and he was above the clouds, and, you know, nobody gave him an order to. It was risky, and he told his wingman to stay up there, and he dove down under the clouds, and you know, his troops were in contact, and he didn't know it before he dove, and he went run after run until he used all his ammunition and came out. But the part that I liked, and I've read similar books, there's a book called Tribe that I really enjoyed, and it talks about the closeness of men when they go to war, you know, suffering from PTSD and things of that nature. What they don't tell people is that a lot of guys miss the bond that they had with guys, because it's a very stressful situation. It's not a situation you can ever simulate unless you're in a war zone, basically. And he says there's things worse than dying. And there was 22 guys on that mountain, and he said one was to shoot my own guys. That would have been worse than dying. And the second one was 22 guys being left behind, and him making it out alive, you know, and living with that. And that's where the author gets into empathy. That's a real bond, and you can relate, and you can kind of feel in that situation, all those guys feel it. But I think in wrestling, it's kind of the same thing, right? When you meet a wrestler on the street and you find out you're wrestlers right away, you have this relationship, this bond. And you can really, you know the feeling. You know what it took to go through strenuous workouts. You knew how difficult it was to be, and you're connected. And that's what I got exactly from that part when he was going through it. And that connection is really important, right? That's the connection a coach has to have with his athlete.
And that was the most critical thing in chapter 1. And if you were going to pull one thing, it's all about empathy. And empathy is, you know, how do you really have the ability to understand and empathize and share the feelings of others, right? And a lot of times as coaches, you know, that's what our guys want to see from us. They want to see, you know, they don't want the player's coach. You know, there's a big distinction, right, between old school coach in the most effective way is what you are saying is as opposed to the player's coach that is probably deferring. In actuality, he's probably doing them a disservice by giving them everything they want, right? I mean, that's kind of what my takeaway when I hear the term player's coach. I'm like, look, your job as a leader is not to be their friend and not to give them anything they want, because when they're out there on their own, without any protection, if you've just told them things that they want to hear, or make it easier on them to make their life more manageable, you're not doing them the favor to actually put them in a position to succeed, right? But also empathy, you understand, you can identify. It's like, yes, guys, I understand this is very difficult, but what I'm putting you through in this situation is nothing that I haven't done myself. Right. So it's a shared experience. I may not be physically sharing it with you in the moment, but I've shared those similar experiences with you from what I've done in the past. And so I am identifying with your pain, with your suffering, but I also understand the outcome of what that pain and suffering is going to produce. And so I think it's actually articulating those things to guys too, not only just, telling them to do something and having the well thought out plan of why this is going to be effective, but also sharing with the guys like, yeah, this is the reason behind it. And I get it, guys. I get what you're going through. I get it. I get it that it's difficult. I get it that it's painful, but I also get that it's necessary. And so I'm identifying this with you to understand that it's going to produce greater forms of growth in the long term for you.
Right. There's only the only thing that I disagree with and what he's saying is spot on. When you have that connection already, and what you're just saying is something everybody said. I've told my guys last time. I've done what you're doing, and that's how I used to get through workouts. I think I told you when one of our podcasts we were talking how we used to run up the Penn State Stadium and we'd run up every single row and you do 10 buddy carries before you start. And the first time I started, I was like, no way this can be done. And then I realized, man, there's been hundreds of guys before me that have done this. And that was my way of relating and getting through it, saying it's not the Bannister's mile here I'm trying to do. The only problem I see like with our sport, and I've said this before too, is that it's easy because like I can walk into a room and I've got some world medals and some national titles. And so you can get a certain amount of respect and people will listen to you. The only problem we have with our sport, and I, if you're listening to this, there's a lot of great coaches out there who don't have the accolades that a lot of people do. And that's the only downside of our sport. And I say this is because I don't watch a ton of football at all, but I was just watching the other day. It was a pro game. And this guy has successfully built, I think, the best defense in the country, almost, they said. And he was a high school football coach. And now somehow he went through the ranks and he's up in the pros. And, and that's the only thing that wrestling's missing. I think there's a lot of guys that are passed over because literally, like some guys, they can't relate to them and that's the only problem with wrestling. I think there's a lot of good coaches that, I think we should look and go further down the pipeline sometimes, and I think it would help our sport as well because there's a lot of energetic guys that don't get a shot.
Yeah. I've always said that's one of the things with our sport. Like we're the only sport that really hires off by and large. I'm not saying it's always the case, but by and large, a lot of the hires made in wrestling are based upon your accomplishments as a wrestler and not necessarily what you've actually done and shown your ability as a coach. Right.
Right.
And some of those, and you even referenced it, some of these coaches that were highly successful, national champs, world champs, Olympic champs, the one critical element that they're lacking is empathy because they can't identify. Yeah. They're so focused, like this is what it took for me to be successful, and I achieved these things. And sometimes it's hard for those guys to relate to the common struggles of the majority of their athletes. They can identify with the superstar, right? Because the superstar maybe has similar abilities, similar mindsets, similar disciplines. And so they're like, that's an easy kid to coach. But you know what? That's an easy kid to coach for anybody, right? The kids that really motivated, really talented, really on board doing everything. But, you know, the majority of the kids that you're coaching and the people you're trying to connect with, they have real world struggles. They don't have as much talent, or maybe they're lacking in discipline, or some of the other areas where high level achievers, they just take those things as a given. Well, yeah, you do this thing. That's what you have to do. You know, that what was easy for them, for the majority of the people they're coaching, the majority of those things are struggles for their athletes. And so, you know, I think, you know, to your point, you look at Nick Saban, you know, the greatest college football coach and maybe one of the best coaches, period, in all of sports. You know, you look at the guy, and he obviously wasn't a first-round draft pick in the NFL. He didn't have a Hall of Fame career. He didn't earn Super Bowl trophies, you know, through his efforts on the field. But he's got a phenomenal mind, and he's got phenomenal empathy, that he knows how to not only identify and empathize, but also do it in a way that sets a standard that continues to generate perpetual success year in and year out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing too, that I, if you're listening, is to watch out for is, like we talked about, you got your upperclassmen, and, you know, they're like the managers of your team, and they forget. I've seen this before, and as they get older and they start getting more success, and you got the new crop of freshmen that come in, and they forget that they were freshmen. You know, I see them in there sometimes, just putting guys through the ringer, and the wrestling side of it, yeah, that's what we want. You put the guy through the ringer, but then, you know, you don't want to just be riding the guy outside of the wrestling room, where, you know, you're critiquing everything he does, or evaluating everything he does, because those freshmen run around for the first 2 months, like, you know, with their heads cut off because of the stress of school and missing mom and dad and trying to keep up and trying to impress coaches, and then just the fact of the you know, there's always a self-evaluation point too, right? Where am I this good after they get beat up for a couple months, you know? And so I try to make my guys aware of that, you know, we're watching them, but at the same time, my team's always going to be closer to the team. And, you know, that's where they have to really remember when they started, where they were at, and help that guy along, you know? So as a coach, it's important that you're managing that. And because then you get two divides, right? You get two teams, and you never want two teams, you know. When you got two teams, you're going to have a problem, and it's going to be a disconnect. And you need the starter ready. You need the backup ready. You need training partners. And you need those guys helping, you know, everybody to keep rolling as one unit. And when you divide, well, then you split your armies, right? And you're just not as solid as you would be. And so it's a situation you got to walk for over time and pay attention to. But
yeah, I think that's a critical thing. And it's also, it's a educational thing for your coaches as well. I think especially when you're developing young coaches, it's, you know, developing those skills of empathy too. Like it's so common for young coaches to, like you were saying, for upperclassmen to identify what it was like to be an underclassman. The same thing goes for a lot of young coaches. They go from being a competitive athlete, and all of a sudden 6 months later, they completely forget how to identify with, hey, you were struggling with these things just 4 months ago, and now you're in a coaching role, and like, you know, you forget them altogether. So I think it's that coaching development that's got to be an ongoing process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, it was pretty good talk. I think we start chapter 2 next week, and keep on rolling with it. And if you're following along, we're reading the book "Leaders Eat Last." You know, it's a quick read. You know, right here as the season gets going, and it can help you, help your staff, and everything we read always I mean, I look at it, if I get one thing that helps my program, I've always been happy with that. But I think we're getting a few different things out of this, and we just keep plugging along. Anything to add before we sign off here, buddy?
No, sounds good. Fun jumping back into this, and looking forward to next week's chat.